Can you imagine 6 Japanese submarines being sunk in exactly 12 days? Are you ready to discover the mathematical secret behind this incredible military record set by the USS England during World War II, which has remained unbroken for over 81 years? Why did traditional depth charges fail? Are you ready to learn how Walton Pendleton and the revolutionary Hedgehog weapon changed the fate of naval warfare with mathematical precision and pioneered modern submarine hunting? How would you define an impossible mission in the dark waters of the Pacific? How did a single American ship, the USS England, hunt down 7 hidden enemy submarines one by one using advanced technology and flawless calculations? Date: May 19, 1944. Time: 1:50. Location: off northern Bougainville. Pacific nights are loneliness in its deepest form. Stars shimmer like shards of broken glass above the water. Waves silently chase one another. In the distance, etched into the darkness of the sky like a thin chalk line, stood a single silhouette: USS England. Small enough to be lost among the great fleets, but tonight it was about to pass through the very center of history. In the narrow, dimly lit Combat Information Center, maps, rulers, and flickering screens appeared like pale manga panels under red lamps. Every face was divided by shadows. Eyes were weary but utterly focused. Beads of sweat glinted on foreheads like fine white highlights. Walton Pendleton was only 37 years old and experiencing his first command on war patrol duty. The sharp lines of his uniform carried not so much the epaulettes on his shoulders as the calculations in the back of his mind. One hand rested on the edge of the console, the other tracing thin pencil lines on the map. For Pendleton, tonight was not merely a hunting operation, it was a test of whether mathematics or tradition was right. The sonar operator's fingers trembled slightly on the console. His headphones practically sealed his ears. The rhythm of his pulse perhaps made a dull sound in harmony with the ship's metal hull. Captain, target moving at 6 knots. Range 1,500 yards, going deeper. Every word in that sentence was as heavy as a steel bullet core. Pendleton raised his head slightly. He narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, an I-16 submarine. 4 days earlier, the message decoded by Fleet Radio Unit Pacific still lingered in his mind. Arrival time, May 19th. Time, 22 o'clock. Target route, the silent waters of northern Bougainville. Now that message had ceased being abstract intelligence and had transformed into a real steel shadow beneath the black water. On deck, atop the grey hull cutting through the sea, a different weapon system stood in an unusual manner. They had named it Hedgehog. It had 24 short, thick projectiles, arranged in a circular pattern. It didn't resemble traditional depth charges. This was a candidate to be the weapon of the future. A silent circle of death that fired forward. Traditional depth charges rolled off the stern and sank into the water, waiting to explode. They were noisy, showy, but often missed. Statistics confirmed this. Out of 5,174 depth charge attacks, only 85 confirmed kills had been achieved. That meant only 1 confirmed kill for every 60 attacks. For Pendleton, this wasn't just about numbers. It was the naked truth of war. Hedgehog's working principle was different. It fired forward, with sonar contact continuing until the last moment and contact fuses that detonated only if they hit something. At first glance, it seemed like an emotionless machine calculation, but in Pendleton's mind, each of these numbers was connected to the young faces in his crew, to families waiting at home, to the muffled breaths of men trapped beneath the sea. Hedgehog attacks require an average of 5 shots for one confirmed kill, much better than depth charges. Mathematics doesn't lie, he thought. Pendleton had done all the calculations in his own mind. For people to believe, making the right calculation wasn't enough. Many captains in the fleet still trusted the noise of that steel cylinder rolling from the stern, that massive explosion that shook the hull. Noise favored tradition, while numbers were silent for now. Pendleton had chosen the silent ones. As the ship moved forward, like a shadow cutting through the ocean's surface, even the rhythm of breathing among all the crew in the Combat Information Center, CIC, had changed. Everyone focused all their attention on the indicators. Range 1,500 yards. Dive continuing, Captain. A voice echoed in the room. I-16 was applying the classic Japanese escape tactic. Sharp turns, constantly changing depth, and a course broken at the last moment. All the officers were like chess masters, playing the same game at opposite ends of the world, never seeing each other. But facing the Japanese submarine admiral now was a bold American admiral. Pendleton ordered the Hedgehog attack. The time was 13:41. The commander's order echoed on deck like machine gun fire. The gunner's hands slid quickly over the metal bodies of the projectiles. 24 projectiles shot into the sky at once. The projectiles appeared as white streaks above the grey sky, then sank one by one beneath the black water. Suddenly there was silence. No explosion sounds. Someone from the crew whispered, "Missed." I-16 had completed its turn at the moment of firing, exiting the firing range. Pendleton ordered a second attack. This time, after the Hedgehog projectiles sank into the water, explosion sounds began to be heard from beneath the surface. One explosion, then another. The explosion sounds began to lift USS England's bow into the air, stretching its metal hull. But this attack wasn't enough. I-16 was badly wounded, but not dead. The third attack also missed like the first. The lines on the sonar screen became clear for a moment, then faded again. Finally, the fathometer revealed the truth. Target at 325 feet, Captain. Pendleton's initial assumptions had been wrong. I-16 was hiding deeper than he expected. This might seem like a small error in calculation, but underwater, this difference meant the fine line between death and life. The fourth attack also missed. In the darkness of the sea, it was impossible to see the Japanese commander's face, but imagining him wasn't difficult. A desperate man bent over the map table, sweating, eyes narrowed even more in low light. He too trusted the traditional tactics he had learned throughout his life. Go as deep as possible, make sharp turns, and make no sound. But in this corner of the world, another equation was quietly being formed. As preparation began for the fifth attack, the atmosphere in the Combat Information Center, CIC, had changed. The sonar operator, with tension rising from his wrists upward, was watching the target's movements more carefully. In the reflection of the sound waves, there was the desperation of the shadow in the depths. Target stabilizing. Ready, Captain. Hedgehog was fired again. This time, the wait wasn't long. First 4 explosions occurred, then 6 more explosions followed. For a moment, the underwater turned into a massive void that swallowed everything. The pressure wave created underwater was lifting USS England's stern from the water into the air. On deck, the bodies of sailors losing their balance were tilting, the handholds in their hands slipping, their pupils widening in astonishment. 20 minutes later, the surface of the sea began to vomit its secret. Oil, wood fragments, fabric pieces, all objects were now on the water. I-16 and the 107 men inside had been buried in the cool waters. Pendleton wanted no cheers. His eyes briefly slid to the map, then to the depth charts. Only one sentence passed through his mind. It takes 5 shots for one target, which means a 20% hit rate. 4 times better than the 5% in trials. The weapon works. There was neither pride nor exaggerated victory intoxication in this sentence. This was simply a confirmed hypothesis, but a bitter hypothesis tested with human lives. This was only the beginning. Date May 20th, 1944, location Tulagi Base. Commander Hamilton Haynes was reading a decoded message at his headquarters in Tulagi. The paper was trembling slightly in his hand, perhaps from the wind, perhaps from the weight of the words inside. The paper read, "Japanese 7th Submarine Flotilla has deployed 7 submarines along the NNA line." 7 submarines meant 7 shadows on a line stretching from Truk Island to Manus Waters. The names of the submarines were RO-104, RO-105, RO-106, RO-108, RO-109, RO-112, RO-116. Each submarine had 56 crew, a total of 392 Japanese sailors. The submarine's mission was clear. They would detect American aircraft carrier task forces. They would be Admiral Suimu Toyoda's eyes and would report where the Americans' next target would be. Haynes looked at the map. 7 dots were marked at regular intervals in mathematical order. This was the kind of order the Japanese Navy liked. But now the Americans had an advantage. The enemy doesn't know where its own eyes are located, but we do. Haynes sent orders to USS England. USS England would join with destroyer escorts USS George and USS Raby. 3 ships would hit 7 targets. The odds seemed impossible, but Pendleton had proven something with I-16. 5 Hedgehog attacks, 1 confirmed kill. A 20% success rate was evident. This rate was 4 times the 5% in initial trials. Hedgehog had worked, and more importantly, the crew now believed in it too. They had heard the explosions, seen the wreckage, counted the oil slicks spreading across the Pacific. The Hunter Group departed Purvis Bay on May 21st. They had formed a standard line formation. In the darkness, there was a 16,000-yard distance between ships. Radar sweeps occurred every 30 seconds. Sonar continuously pinged. The Japanese submarines maintained radio silence. There would be no more messages to decode. Now there was no question of searching for exact coordinates. The Hunter Group would find them through electronic detection, patience, and mathematical calculations. Pendleton was examining maps in his cabin. The NA line stretched over routes Admiral Halsey had used before. Was it possible to predict the Japanese? Could they have placed the submarines where the Americans had passed before? But Fleet Radio Unit Pacific had provided the Americans with an advantage the Japanese didn't know about. The Americans knew exactly where the picket line was. The critical question was timing. The timing of submarine patrols could be predicted. They surface at night, charge their batteries. They dive at dawn. They stay underwater all day, surface again after sunset. Time for radar detection was tight. Submarines are vulnerable but fast on the surface. A submarine commander could dive in 60 seconds, reach 200 feet depth in 3 minutes, disappear in the black water. USS England's crew had drilled for this. Sonar operators could track a diving submarine, calculate depth, estimate speed, predict position. Hedgehog launchers could be loaded and fired in 90 seconds. 24 projectiles could draw a 130-foot circle and sink to 30 feet depth. Each shot was a gamble. Contact fuses provided certainty. If the projectiles exploded, they had definitely hit something. If they remained silent, they had missed. The mathematics was simple but merciless. 7 submarines, 56 men per submarine, a total of 392 Japanese sailors. If things went well, one Hedgehog attack could kill them all in 9 seconds. Date May 22, 1944, time 3:50. USS George's radar detected a surface contact at 15,000 yards. The first submarine had been found. RO-106 was charging its batteries. It never saw the destroyer escorts coming. USS George's searchlight caught RO-106 on the surface. The submarine immediately had to make an emergency dive. Seawater was flowing into the ballast tanks. The bow was angling downward. It went underwater within 90 seconds. USS George fired Hedgehog at 4:15. 24 projectiles sank into the dark water. There was silence. The target had been missed. USS England regained sonar contact at 4:25. Range was 1,400 yards. RO-106 was moving in the depths, making sharp turns. The Japanese commander knew the tactic: turn inside the attack range, constantly change depth, force the Americans to guess. Pendleton wasn't guessing. The sonar operator was tracking every turn, reporting depth changes, range, direction. Data went directly to the Hedgehog firing solution. The first attack missed. RO-106 had turned 30 degrees during the projectile's sink time. 9 seconds was enough for a submarine to move 150 feet. The second attack occurred at 5:01. 24 projectiles formed their circular pattern, heading towards the darkness underwater. 3 explosion sounds, then a massive underwater explosion was heard. The pressure wave was drawing circles on the surface. USS England's hull trembled. USS George and USS Raby felt the violence of the explosion from 4,000 yards away. At sunrise, an oil slick half a mile wide was sitting on the water. Metal pieces, submarine wreckage made of planks were floating. There were no survivors. 24 hours after I-16, the second submarine had also been destroyed. The 3 destroyers reformed the escort line, with 16,000 spacing, continuing northeast along the NA line. The next submarine could be somewhere out there. RO-104, RO-105, or any of the remaining 5. Japanese submarine commanders maintained strict radio silence, but surfaced at predictable intervals. Batteries needed charging, electric motors needed power, diesel engines needed air. Date May 23, 1944, time 6 o'clock. USS Raby's radar detected another surface contact. Range was 22,000 yards. The contact was diving before identification. The Japanese commander had learned something after RO-106's sinking. Stay deep. Make them guess your depth. USS Raby fired 4 Hedgehog attacks, starting at 6:17. All resulted in target misses. RO-104 was turning inside the attack range. USS George tried too. The first attack occurred at 7:17 and missed. The second, third, fourth attacks occurred between 7:30 and 8:10. In all attacks, the target was missed. The Japanese submarine commander was apparently a successful commander. Each time projectiles fell on him, he turned, changed depth, negating the calculations made. Division Commander Haynes was closely monitoring USS England's status. So far, Pendleton's crew had 2 kills. USS Raby and USS George had no kills. USS England was the killer of this Japanese hunter group. Haynes transmitted 5 words over the radio that would become naval legend. Oh hell, go ahead, USS England. Pendleton's first Hedgehog attack also missed. RO-104 had managed to turn, but in the second attack at 8:34, 10 or 12 explosions occurred. The explosions were terrible, like a lion's roar. The explosion sounds were followed by fragmentation sounds. Metal was tearing, compartments were collapsing. Then 3 minutes later, a massive underwater explosion occurred. The submarine's batteries had exploded. Oil and wreckage surfaced at 10:45. The third kill had been achieved. In 72 hours, 3 submarines had been destroyed, 163 Japanese sailors had lost their lives, and USS England still had 4 more targets ahead. Date, May 24, 1944, time 1:20. USS George's radar detected RO-116 on the surface. Range was 15,000 yards. The submarine began diving at 1:30. USS England established sonar contact at 1:50. The same as the previous 3 attacks would be repeated. First, radar detection would be made, then the submarine would be forced to make an emergency dive. USS England would track with sonar and initiate the Hedgehog attack. But RO-116's commander had changed tactics. He was going shallow on the water, about 150 feet. Most submarine commanders dove to 300 feet, 400 feet deep. They put maximum water between themselves and the surface to act as maximum cushioning against explosions. RO-116's commander was doing the opposite, staying shallow, making sharp turns. He could bet that the Americans' firing solutions were calibrated for deep targets. But the Japanese commander was guessing wrong. Pendleton's sonar operator was reporting the shallow depth. The Hedgehog firing solution was adjusting instantly. At 2:14, the first attack occurred. 3, maybe 5 explosions occurred. There wasn't the massive explosion of previous kills. No battery explosion, just the sound of 65-pound projectiles piercing the pressure hull at 723 feet, second speed, opening 3-inch holes. At 150 feet depth, seawater began entering a submarine at 400 gallons per minute through a 3-inch hole. The fragmentation sounds weren't loud, only the groan of metal under pressure was heard. The submarine was sinking deeper. More holes meant more water meant more weight meant sinking deeper. At 300 feet, pressure was increasing. More water was flowing in. The temperature inside was rising to 200, 300 degrees. The crew's lungs were burning. Within 6 minutes, the entire crew on the ship had lost their lives. The submarine continued to sink. Oil and wreckage surfaced at 7:02 after sunrise. The small amount of oil leakage continued to expand over several square miles for 24 hours. 56 more Japanese sailors had lost their lives. The 4th submarine kill in 5 days had been achieved. The news reached Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, who commanded every ship in the United States Navy, at the Navy Department in Washington. King was reading action reports. A destroyer escort had sunk 4 submarines in 5 days, using a weapon most commanders didn't trust. King sent a message to 3rd Fleet. The message was quite simple and clear. There'll always be a USS England in the United States Navy. This message spread throughout the Pacific Fleet within hours. USS England was becoming famous. Every fame is attention-grabbing, and every attention would bring new orders and duties. On May 25th, Admiral Halsey wanted to pull USS England from submarine hunting, assign it to aircraft carrier escort duty. It was too valuable to risk. Its 4 submarine kills had made its crew experienced. Experienced crews were rarely found. Their lives shouldn't be put at risk. Commander Haynes rejected this request. There were 3 submarines on the NA line that needed to be destroyed. USS England had sunk 4 in 5 days. Statistics and calculations said it could kill the rest in 3 days. Now, pulling USS England from duty would leave everything half-finished. This situation would allow Japanese submarines to continue reporting American fleet movements, and the intelligence advantage would be lost. Halsey accepted the current situation. Date May 26, 1944. Time 23:03. USS Raby caught RO-108 on radar at 15,000 yards, 110 nautical miles northeast of Seidler Harbor. The submarine was diving. USS England established sonar contact at 1,650 yards. The Japanese commander was making the same mistake as RO-116, staying shallow, making sharp turns, believing the Americans couldn't track him. Pendleton's crew had tracked 4 submarines before. They knew every escape tactic, every depth change, every turn pattern. USS Raby was attempting the kill, but missing with Hedgehog. Division Commander Haynes gave the same order again. Go ahead, USS England. At 23:23, USS England initiated a Hedgehog attack on RO-108. 4 or 6 projectile hits occurred. The explosions came so close together, they sounded like a single hit. RO-108 immediately began to break apart. There was no slow water intake or gradual sinking. The pressure hull was tearing at multiple points simultaneously. The submarine was collapsing inward. 56 men lost their lives in less than 3 seconds. Too short a time to understand what happened. The 5th submarine in 6 days had also been sunk. The number of Japanese sailors who lost their lives was 279. At Japanese Imperial Navy headquarters in Tokyo, Admiral Toyoda was reviewing patrol reports. There were 7 submarines deployed on the NA line. 5 submarines appeared to have been lost. No distress calls or emergency transmissions. They were completely buried in silence. 1 submarine had been lost every 24 hours. The situation was quite clear. Something was sinking the submarines. Fast, effective, something the submarine commanders couldn't escape. Toyoda was issuing new orders to the remaining submarines. RO-105 and RO-109 received new orders on May 27th. The orders were new patrol depth would be minimum 400 feet. The new surface protocol was also quite clear. Battery charging would not be done unless absolutely necessary. The new escape tactic would be as follows. At first detection, move away silently. Don't make sharp maneuvers. Sharp maneuvers make noise. Noise gives sonar operators better tracking data. The Japanese were learning, but they were learning from dead men's mistakes. Date May 30th, 1944, time 21:45. USS England, USS George, and USS Raby continued northeast. 2 submarines remained on the NA line. They had to be somewhere in 3,000 square miles of ocean. The Americans had an advantage. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific could still detect Japanese transmissions. Every radio message gave position data. Every position report revealed patrol patterns. But the tactical situation was changing. 5 submarine kills had depleted USS England's Hedgehog ammunition. 24 projectiles were fired for each attack. 120 projectiles had been spent for 5 attacks. USS England carried a total of 240 rounds. 120 rounds remained. 5 more attacks could be made, maybe 6 if the crew was careful. And the Japanese submarines were adapting to the situation. On May 30th, USS George detected RO 105 on radar at 21:45. The submarine immediately began diving. But this time the Japanese commander was doing something different. He was going to 400 feet depth, then stopping all engines. Complete silence prevailed. No propeller noise or engine vibration. Nothing the sonar could detect. USS England established contact at 2,200 yards. The signal was intermittent and weak. The submarine was barely moving. Sonar operators called this a knuckle, a patch of turbulent water creating false returns. The submarine could be anywhere within 200 yards of the signal. Pendleton faced a choice. He would fire Hedgehog despite the weak contact and probably miss. He would have to spend 24 valuable projectiles. Or he would wait for the submarine to move. He would give up tactical advantage and wait for whenever the Japanese commander would start the engines. He chose to wait. 4 hours had passed, still no sound from the submarine. After a long time, at 2:30 on May 31st, the signal began to strengthen. Row 105 was moving. Battery power was running out. The electric motors needed charging. The commander had no other choice. He had to surface. But like a desperate gambler, he had one last tactic he thought might work. Date May 31st, 1944, time 3:15. Row 105's commander decided to surface at 3:15, but not where USS England was waiting. The submarine had drifted with the current during those 4 silent hours, moving 3 miles from its last known position. USS George's radar caught it at 13,000 yards. As USS England turned towards the new direction, RO 105 had already made an emergency dive. The Japanese commander had gained himself 90 seconds of battery charging. 90 seconds was enough to add 10% power to his depleted batteries and get away. USS England regained sonar contact at 3:45. RO 105 was deep and moving at 6 knots, northeast away from the destroyer group. The Japanese commander was a good commander, perhaps the best they had encountered. He had studied previous attacks, learned from the 5 sunken submarines, knew that being deep and fast made Hedgehog attacks difficult. The only problem the Japanese commander hadn't accounted for was mathematics. Hedgehog projectiles sank at 23 feet per second. At 400 feet depth, it would take 17 seconds for projectiles to reach target depth. In 17 seconds, a submarine moving at 6 knots would travel 170 feet. The firing solution required predicting where the submarine would be in 17 seconds. Guessing wrong would mean the circular pattern would completely miss. Pendleton's first Hedgehog attack at 4:05 missed by 200 feet. RO 105 had turned during the projectile's descent. The second attack at 4:23 missed by 100 feet. This was a better guess, but still wrong. The submarine kept changing speed. First 6 knots, then 4 knots, then back to 6 knots. This made mathematical calculations impossible. USS England had fired 48 projectiles. Only 72 projectiles remained. It could conduct 3 more attacks, maybe 3.5 if the crew loaded carefully. There were 3 more chances to sink RO 105 before ammunition ran out. Division Commander Haynes was watching from USS George. This engagement was different from the others. The previous 5 submarines were quick kills, 2 attacks, maximum 3 attacks, and they sank. RO 105 had survived 2 attacks, heading toward a 3rd, maybe 4th. The Japanese commander was winning the mathematics game. At 4:47, Pendleton's sonar operator detected a pattern. RO-105 was turning every 4 minutes, 30 degrees to port, then 30 degrees to starboard. One forward, one back. The pattern was consistent and predictable. The Japanese commander might think it was random, but people don't move randomly. They can be caught in pattern routines. Pendleton was adjusting the firing solution, predicting the turn, taking the target 200 feet ahead. At 5:08, the third Hedgehog attack occurred. 24 projectiles were sinking into the Pacific, descending into darkness. 5 explosions occurred in succession, not like the massive explosion of previous kills. RO-105's pressure hull had been pierced but not destroyed. The submarine continued to move, taking water but not sinking. The Japanese commander had put emergency action procedures into effect. Blow ballast tanks, surface, abandon ship, save the crew. But USS England's fourth attack at 5:32 hit the submarine with 8 explosions. The blowing of ballast tanks stopped. The submarine was breaking apart. The crew never reached the surface. Oil and wreckage began to appear on the water at 6:15 after sunrise. On the 12th day, the 6th submarine had been sunk. 335 Japanese sailors had lost their lives. Date June 1, 1944. Admiral Halsey was receiving the report at 3rd Fleet Headquarters. A destroyer escort ship had sunk 6 submarines in 12 days with a weapon system most commanders didn't trust. An unbelievable, unique, unprecedented record. But one submarine remained. RO-109. Admiral Halsey was issuing new orders on June 1st. Pull USS England from submarine hunting immediately. 6 kills were enough. USS England had proven the Hedgehog weapon system. A proof beyond all doubt. Every destroyer escort in the Pacific Fleet would update their training, tactics, and firing solutions based on USS England's action reports. But RO-109 was never found. The submarine, after RO-108 sank, had received Toyota's warning, abandoned its patrol station, headed deep and silently toward Truk. It survived the war, surrendered in August 1945. RO-109's crew learned months later about the engagements on the NA line, that 6 of their sister submarines had been destroyed in 12 days by a single ship using a weapon system they had never heard of. In July, the Presidential Unit citation reached USS England, one of 3 destroyer escorts to have this honor throughout the entire war. The citation briefly read, "For extraordinary heroism in action against enemy Japanese submarines." The words were inadequate to describe what USS England's crew had accomplished. Mathematics and numbers could perhaps describe this achievement. British forces had launched 5,174 depth charge attacks throughout the war, of which only 85 were recorded as confirmed kills. The success rate was 1.6%. Hedgehog attacks before USS England went on patrol showed a 5% success rate. 26 attacks were needed for each kill. USS England raised the record bar very high. In approximately 15 Hedgehog attacks, 6 submarines were destroyed. This meant a 40% success rate. This statistic meant being 25 times more effective than depth charges, 8 times more effective than the Hedgehog average. The Hedgehog weapon system became standard on every destroyer escort by September 1944. Training protocols were changed. Sonar operators studied USS England's tracking techniques. Hedgehog crews practiced according to USS England's loading procedures. Fire control officers memorized USS England's firing solutions. In the Atlantic, Hedgehog sank 47 German U-boats until the end of the war. A total of 268 attacks were conducted. 47 confirmed kills were achieved. The success rate was 17.5%. The best anti-submarine weapon of the war was still the Hedgehog, but no ship reached USS England's 12-day record. Not only in the Pacific or Atlantic, there was no ship that reached this record on any front. Lieutenant Commander Pendleton received the Navy Cross in August, one medal for 6 submarines. The citation commemorated his tactical genius, his crew's discipline, the weapon system's effectiveness. But it didn't commemorate the most important thing: mathematics. While other commanders trusted tradition, Pendleton had trusted numbers. While others trusted experience, he calculated firing solutions. While others guessed, he predicted submarine movements. It was the numbers and mathematics that were proven right. USS England continued escort duty throughout the summer of 1944. It participated in convoy protection, aircraft carrier screening, anti-submarine patrol duties. It never found another submarine. It never fired Hedgehog again in the war. On October 31, 1944, a kamikaze aircraft struck USS England off Leyte Gulf. The bomb hit the forward engine room. It killed 37 crew members, wounded 25. The damage USS England sustained was catastrophic. According to damage assessment work, repairs would take 6 months, would cost more than building a new ship. The Navy decided USS England wasn't worth saving. It was towed to Manus Island, stripped of usable equipment, abandoned to scrap. In November 1946, it was dismantled at a scrapyard. The ship that sank 6 submarines in 12 days ended its life as razors and tin cans. But the record it broke stood. It still stands. 81 years later, USS England is still the greatest submarine hunter in naval history. Walton Pendleton survived the war. He was promoted to commander, assigned as commander of an escort division in Alaska. He spent the last year of the war hunting Japanese submarines in the North Pacific. But he never found any submarines. World War II ended in August 1945. Pendleton retired from the Navy in 1961 after 34 years of service. He passed away in 1973 at age 66. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Finally, if this story deeply affected you as it did us, please press the like button. Every like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every week, we try to bring you forgotten stories from dusty archives. Please write in the comments which country and which city you're watching from. And if there's someone serving in your family, you are ambassadors of peace to spread our community around the world. You are part of keeping these memories alive.